We're going to go ahead and get started. It is actually 11:01. Just want to make sure real quick that everybody can hear me. If you have a second, if you could just chime in on the chat and just let me know that you can hear me. I got one yes. Can hear you. Okay. All right. So then let's get going. So I hope you are all here to listen to upcoming changes for students that are coming rapidly, actually. I'll go ahead and spoil the end and let you know that these changes are going in the system tonight. So I'm giving you a preview. It's like reading the last page of the book. For those of you that don't know my voice, I'm Jackie Treschel. I'm on the Connect Carolina Change Management team. In the room with me, I actually have more than just Julie Dawkins and Tanisha Hart. Julie and Tanisha work on the Connect Carolina project on the student side. And so I knew that they were coming. So they are listed on here to answer any questions that I don't know the answer to at the end. We also have some folks in here from the cashier's office. So we have Angie, Kelly, and Tad from the cashier's office. So if you have questions about those changes from that perspective, when we get there, they're on hand to answer the questions as well. And then our moderator for today is Rachel Lillis. She is also on the change management team with me, and she'll be here to read out our questions at the end. And then if there's any sort of technical problems, she'll be answering chats along the way. So talking about the format today, if you've attended one of our change management, our Connect Carolina webinars in the past, this is going to follow that same format. So it's a presentation. It's about 20-25 minutes of content, and then we'll have time for question and answer at the end. We do have this booked for an hour, so plenty of time to answer those questions. If you have a question during the presentation, go ahead and feel free to use the chat window to ask the question. I know that Zoom has a Q&A feature. I sometimes forget to check that. I'm hoping Rachel will do that better than I do, but please use the chat function to ask your question. And if at a stopping point, I found that it's easier sometimes to answer those questions when they're in context of what's going on. So we'll at least stop at the end of each section and look at those questions, see if there's any questions that have come in. But otherwise, we'll answer any other questions in the order that they came in at the end of the presentation. And then if you have to jump off, or if there's somebody in your office that couldn't attend today, we are going to post this webinar, the recording of it, on ccinfo.unc.edu. It should be up by tomorrow. So let's get going. Let's talk about what today's topics are. So we've got 3 sections. We're going to talk about the changes for students. This is going to be what students are going to see when the changes go into the system. And then because of those changes for students, as admins, there are some new pages that you'll see going forward. And then we're going to talk about the timing of the changes, which I already kind of gave you that heads up sneak preview. Although you actually probably already knew about the timing of the changes because you're on the webinar, because you got the email that went out from the registrar's office earlier this week that had the timing in there as well. But we're just going to cover that as well. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's talk about what students are going to see going forward. So what's coming for students, just at a high level. So there's a new student PIN, there's a third-party PIN, there's a repurposed tile in Connect Carolina that's now going to be called the Agreements and Confirmations tile. And then we want to highlight the enrollment confirmation piece that's coming with that. So we're going to break down what each of those things is as we go forward. And just for, making sure that we are clear about exactly what we're talking about, PIN, personal identification number. So these are going to be numbers that the student is able to go into Connect Carolina and set up, and that university staff will use to make sure that if somebody calls requesting information about the student, whether it's the student or somebody else, there's going to be 2 separate PINs, one that the student will use that you can make sure you're talking to the student. It's sort of the way we're sending it to the students is it's sort of like 2-step verification, but over the phone. because the student will have been the one to set up that PIN. And so like their ATM PIN, they should be the only one that knows that PIN. Then there's the third-party PIN, which is if they're giving somebody else access to call and get information about their enrollment at the university or their billing at the university, they'll be able to give that PIN as well. And there's some other features with that third-party PIN that we're going to talk about as well. So the student doesn't have to give access to all of their information. So let's jump in and look at what those look like. So this first section, this first set of slides are pages that students will see. So this is not something that you as admins in the offices can see. This is the pages that students will see. And you will see the change. If you were ever a student at Carolina, you know that you have the student homepage as well. You'll see the change on the page, but if you're no longer a student, it doesn't really matter to you for those types of things. So we're gonna look here, we have our fake student, Juan Trainwell. So this is what his student homepage is gonna look like when the changes go into the system. So to get to the student PIN, so this is for him to set up a PIN so that he can call, say, the cashier's office and ask about the balance on his account. He's going to click on the personal information tile. And when he does that, it's going to take him to a menu of options on the left side. And the last option in that section says student PIN. So I've already opened the page here in these slides that you see here. So on that page, it's a fairly simple, fairly intuitive page for the student. It has the instructions for why it's required. And then they will enter their 4-digit PIN. There are a couple of rules around entering the PIN. They can't use the same number 4 times in a row. So they can't use 1111. So if their birthday is 11/11 and that's what they're trying to use, can't use it. And it is going to prohibit them from doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like research shows some high percentage of people actually use 1, 2, 3, 4 as a 4-digit PIN when they have to do that. So we are actually, it's not secure at that point. So we're going to restrict them from being able to do that. Otherwise, those are the only 2 restrictions on the PIN. They'll enter the number in there and then there's a save button. They can save it. It tells them that it saves successfully, like in our screen here. And so this is what the student will go to. They can go and set the PIN as often as they want. They want to change it every day. If they are in a situation where they call an office that requires the PIN after the first of the year, they call an office and they haven't yet set up the PIN, they're going to be able to do that while they're on the phone. You know, they can go to their laptop, set the PIN up. It's going to be an immediate thing for the staff to be able to see it on the other end. So as soon as they click save and it's saved, they'll be able to do that. I see that a question has come in.
There are 2 questions.
Okay.
One is there a PIN recovery?
That I don't think so, and the reason would be that they can just go back in and reset the PIN. So if they have forgotten their PIN or whatever, all they need to do is log into Connect Carolina, click that personal information tile, reset their PIN, and it'll override it.
They can see it.
They can see it.
Recovery is just log in.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, do departmental staff across campus need to use the PIN if they call the registrar's office, cashier's office, etc., to discuss a student's enrollment? So staff don't need it. It's only for students and others that the student designate.
That they've given access
But if
to.
you're a departmental registrar with a business need to discuss that, you do not need a PIN.
It would be the same procedure as today.
Yeah.
As what happens now. Right. All right. So moving on from the PIN. So we have our student. He's gone in, he set up his PIN. And now he also needs to give his parents, you know, for whatever reason, he wants his parents to have access to his information. So he is going to do that using a new link on the student homepage links tile. In the past, there were two separate links and then a third link, I believe, with instructions on how to set up a proxy for the student. They've all been combined onto one page. It is important to note that these proxy pages that we're getting ready to look at are for the enrollment information, the Connect Carolina information. If they need to set up an authorized user to pay the bill, they're still going to use the Manage Pay Student Account link like they do today, which is going to take them to TouchNet to do that. So this piece for the proxies, which is to be able to see their information in Connect Carolina, and then also where they'll set up that PIN, is specific to that Connect Carolina information. But to be able to log on and pay their student bills or manage their student billing, that's still going to go through the Managed Pay Student Account link. So when they click on this link, it's going to take them to this page that has those links that used to say Manage Proxy, Invite Third-Party Proxy. Those are all on this page now, and they're a little bit more descriptive about what it is. Our thought is that students don't really know what a proxy is. They just know that they're giving someone else their information, so that's the terms we're going to use for that. The new page is the authorized university offices to communicate with individuals. So when they click this page, if they have previously exercised their right under FERPA to not share their information with anyone else, they are going to get this warning message that tells them that they've already exercised their rights to prevent us from sharing information about them with anybody else. By setting up this PIN, by letting somebody else have it, that they're authorizing that communication to somebody else, and they're sort of overriding the FERPA for that person. So if they haven't done that, they won't see this message, but if they have, they'll see this message. Once they check the box, they're going to get this screen. It is very small because there's a lot of information on the screen, so I'm going to zoom into the important part right here, which is how they're going to set it up. So they're going to be able to put in the proxy's first name and last name, the proxy's email address, and then they can assign a 4-digit PIN. The same rules apply here as for the student PIN. Can't be the same 4 numbers in a row, and it can't be 1, 2, 3, 4. So they can do that and set that PIN. It can be the same PIN as their student PIN, but that actually they shouldn't do that, but the system won't prevent them from doing that. And then they can share the information. They can choose what information is allowed to be shared with that other person. So university staff will be able to look and say, okay, I can share their class schedule, but not their semester GPA and their eligibility. So they get simple check boxes, and then they can save changes or not. They can add proxies, they can delete proxies, they can come back and change what their proxy is allowed to see. At the bottom of the page is a history of everything they've done for that proxy, for all their proxies. So they can see right there, they've assigned the proxy, they've updated it, they deleted them, that sort of thing. And then up in that top box from the screen we were just looking at, the Zoom screen, that's highlighted in blue, it shows how many proxies they have, so they could scroll through each proxy. So if they want to let their parents and their grandparents, everybody have access, they can set them all up as proxies. And again, the proxy would then need to have the information to be able to give that to university staff when they call to make sure that they are talking to somebody that has access. All right, are there some questions that are coming in that we should address right now?
No, it was about pins.
Okay, so well, why don't we call them out just so that we can have them on the recording?
Yeah, it just asked if the pins expire, and they do not expire.
They do not expire. Correct. Okay. Any other questions on student PIN or proxy PIN? Nothing? All right. So we will move on. And if you think of something, just put it in there and we'll address it as we get there. So the agreements and confirmations tile. So what that is Currently it says tasks. It has the same icon going forward. Right now in the system, that takes students to the student center, but they already have a tile that goes to the student center. So we're repurposing that tile. It does have a counter to tell them how many open items that they need to, things they need to handle on there. And when they click it, much like the personal information tile before, they're going to have a menu down the left side. The first page that's going to open here is the enrollment confirmation page. If they go to that page before the start of classes, it will say classes will show up here on the first day of the term. So they won't have anything to do until the first day of the next term. But I want to talk about what these confirmations and agreements are that are on this left side, because they are, some of them are new. And wow, that did not work. Okay, so I had to make a change in the slides and I didn't zoom it right. Sorry about that, guys. So enrollment confirmation. So again, if you've seen the email, it is going to be used to confirm academic participation, that they've started that participation in each class, and they're going to use it to agree to the UNC Honor Code. We're going to talk a little bit more about the enrollment confirmation piece in just a minute. The Title IV agreement. So students have to agree to the terms of how Title IV funds are dispersed and what charges they can be used for. So that's just going to be a checkbox and an agree and submit. Mandatory health insurance is going to allow the student to see the status of their health insurance classification. So if they're enrolled in Student Blue health insurance, or if they've put in a waiver to be waived from having Student Blue, if that's been approved. And then the 1098T agreement allows the student to agree to receive their 1098T, which is their tuition statement, electronically instead of on paper. So that's just saying, I know you're not going to mail me a copy on paper. And then there's a financial responsibility option, which basically students are going to need to accept that they understand that they, the student, are ultimately responsible for all charges incurred as part of their enrollment at the university. So that the financial responsibility piece is a new piece. So going forward, it will be something that it's a one-time thing. First year students will do it likely at orientation or when they're registering for the first time. But beyond that, it's just a one-time thing. So going back to talking about that enrollment confirmation piece. So this is going to be new. It is a federal requirement that we know what students have actually started their classes. And so we are not, however, an attendance taking university. So this is something that we need students to go in and confirm that they have done this. The potential for consequences if they don't do this is that they may not be allowed to enroll for the next term, and they may lose some or all of their federal financial aid if they have not done this. So this is a new step that they're going to have to do, and this is required for all degree-seeking students at the university. So it doesn't matter if they're undergraduate or graduate or professional school students, they are going to have to do this, and it is something that they'll have to do every term that they're here, and they won't be able to do it until the first day of that class. So the classes won't even be listed until the term opens, but then so the next term starts on a Wednesday, I believe. So classes with a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, those Wednesday classes would show up on Wednesday, but the Thursday classes for a Tuesday, Thursday class aren't going to show up until Thursday. So they're going to need to come in potentially multiple times and do it after the start of each class. And all they're going to do, they'll see all the classes that they're listed there, and they're just going to slide the button which says confirm, and it turns green and shows that it's confirmed, and then there's a time and date stamp on the other side in the next column. And then they have to agree to the honor code and then submit confirmations. They can come back, as I mentioned, and do this after each class. They can come back if they realize they forgot to do it. They had classes that started on Wednesday. They can go in on Thursday and come back and do it. Each time it will show them what they've already confirmed. If they drop a class, it will still show up on here. If they drop it after census, no, if they drop it before census, it will be removed from the page. So census is the official, when we send the enrollment numbers for the semester to the state. So that date for spring term is January 22nd. So if they drop a class, if they've confirmed enrollment and then they drop the class and census hasn't happened yet, it will be removed from this page. If they drop a class after census has happened, the class will stay on the page, but under enrollment status, it will say dropped. But what they're confirming here is that they have either attended, they've attended the class, they've started coursework in some regard. This even applies to folks that are studying abroad. They do have coursework listed in the system. So they will have to do that as well, and go in and confirm that they've started their academic activity for the semester. I do see that a question came in.
We have more than one question.
Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and deal with those, because I think this is the most confusing piece.
Yes, is
going
there
forward.
a PeopleSoft field we will need to check as staff for their class confirmation?
Okay, so we were actually going to talk about this as we got to the admin pages, but yes, there is a page that the central student offices will have access to. So if you are in a campus office as a student services manager, you will not have access to that page, but staff in like the registrar's office, the cashier's office, the admissions office, financial aid, they'll have access to that page to be able to go check. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute.
All right. Is the enrollment confirmation required for non-degree seeking students, specifically summer school visitors?
No, this is for degree seeking students only.
All right. When is the deadline to complete enrollment confirmation? What if students complete it in the middle of semester or the end of the semester?
It's going to remain open until the end of the term, but the encouragements that will be sent out will be to do it before the end of drop ad, which is census. And there'll be reminders going out constantly to those students because those offices are going to need them to complete it before the end of the term.
And if this holds registration for the following semester, it's in the student's best interest to do that before registration opens for the following semester.
Yes.
So that's the carrot. Will the enrollment confirmation screen recognizes courses that start the second half of the semester?
It will. So there are some schools that have alternate schedules. Any class, this page is actually going off of the start date in the registrar's tables. And so regardless of when that start date is, that's when the class will show up.
All right.
How much communication will be sent to students that this needs to be done?
A fair amount. We have a plan to start communicating with students. They are going to get a notification at the end of this week that this is coming for spring semester. And then starting at the beginning of spring semester, we have some emails that are going to go out. They're going to see notices when they log into Connect Carolina to get things like their class schedule that they need to do this. We're going to have electronic posters around campus. On the TV screens, we're going to have them hopefully up in the residence halls to let them know. We're really going to make a push to let them know that this is coming. One thing that's important to note in terms of like comparable size, University of California, Davis actually implemented this last year, I think also at spring term, and just through reminder emails and whatnot, they had like 98% compliance from students in that first semester. So that's a pretty impressive number. And if for nothing else, we can always tell, our students here at Carolina that UC Davis had 98% compliance. So we should go for 99.
So another question, if a student adds, I think this is supposed to mean after course census, so if they add a course late after census, will they need to go back and do that for the new class?
They will.
Yes, for all classes. If they are a degree seeking student, they will need to confirm their participation in all classes.
And will staff receive a copy of student notifications so staff know what is being communicated to students?
That's a good question. I think we can take that back and discuss it. I don't know that we have the answer to that. That's probably not a bad idea, though, to just give everybody a heads up. So thanks for that. I do see one more about, will a hold be placed on a student's account if this is not completed?
So right now, the wording on the page and the communications to the students is may. And so it'll be up to the registrar's office and the financial aid office as to if and when they're going to actually enforce the may. And so, but before they did that, they would certainly send out wide communications to let all the students know that the restriction was going to happen.
All right. Okay, so moving on. So that is everything for the students. So those are the big changes for the students. So now looking at for you as staff at the university. So there are 4 new pages that are going into Connect Carolina. So there's a page for student PIN, there's a page for the third-party PIN, the enrollment confirmation, and the student agreements. I mentioned it earlier, but I do want to reiterate, your access to these pages is determined by your role in Connect Carolina and what you already have access to. So the student PIN, if you have access to the student center currently, the student PIN and the third-party PIN you will see. The enrollment confirmation and the student agreements is limited to central student offices. So again, that's folks in the registrar's office, the cashier's office, scholarships and student aid, those type of things. There are staff in student health that will see the student agreements page because they need to be able to look at that mandatory health insurance page. So again, there are 4 new pages. You may have all or none of these pages depending on what your role is in the system and at the university. So let's take a look at those and how you'll get to them. So hopefully everybody knows this. This is the Admin Work Center homepage. Just a quick plug, if you are still navigating using the compass icon on the far right, there is a Student Admin Work Center. There are a fair amount of pages under there that you can get to in Connect Carolina. So if you aren't already using the Work Center, we would encourage you to give it a try and see if you can get to those pages going forward. So when you click on the Student Admin Work Center under the Campus Community folder, that's where these 4 new pages are going to live. And again, I just want to reiterate this. If you see the links, that means you have access to them. When you get to work tomorrow and you log in and you don't see those links and you are, say you are in the registrar's office and you should see the enrollment confirmation, then, give the help desk a call, the ITS service desk a call, and we can figure that out. But if you see the links, you have access to the pages. You shouldn't see the links if you don't have that access. So let's look at each of the pages one at a time. So the student PIN piece, when you click student PIN, it's going to take you to a search page. You're going to put in, the best option is always to search by PID because it's a unique identifier. But if you only have first and last name, you would put that information in there, click search. So again, this is the student has called you and said, I need information about my class schedule, or I need information about my bill. Starting spring semester, you'll need to go in and verify that you are in fact talking to that student. So you would do the search and it brings up this page. You can't do anything on this page. All you can do is see that the PIN. So we see the PIN is 4454. So if Juan gives you another PIN, if he says 7863, well, that's not the PIN that you set up in Connect Carolina. So probably not talking to Juan. So that's what you would use this for. And again, this is starting spring semester. Third-party proxy PIN. So that's the option right under student PIN. And this looks surprisingly familiar to the page that the student used to set up the PIN, because it is. The difference is this page is a view only page. You as staff have can't do anything on this page. So I'm going to zoom in. Again, this is a kind of busy page. And so when, in this instance, he's given access to Becky. So when Becky calls and says, I need information about, let's just use an example. I need to know what Juan's grades were last semester. So you as staff would be able to log in, look, okay, Becky, can you tell me that the pin, what the pin is that Juan has set up for you? Okay, it's 2456. All right. Unfortunately, I can't give you his prior semester grades. He hasn't given you access to that information. The checkboxes on the screen are fairly light in the presentation, but they're noticeable in the system. So you'll be able to see, I can't give you that information. You need to have that conversation with Juan. I can tell you what his class schedule is because he's giving me access to have that. But you'll be able to use this page to know what information that you can and can't see, or that you can and can't give out. And you also have, down at the bottom, you'll see that same history that the student had on their page. So you'll be able to see, oh, I can see that, he updated the pin at this time, and made the change. So if it's well, I called last week and got this information, then, maybe the student made an update, maybe that sort of thing. So you as staff will have that ability to see what changes were made in the system. So, it's not, they're not just saying, well, I already did this once before, just tell me. So I say all this as the parent of a college student, so.
And I'll add one quick thing about those checkboxes. They are a little bit faint in production as well, and the reason for that is because this page, anytime a page becomes read-only, it becomes more faint. And so we are trying to figure out a way to make those checkboxes darker for the administrators. It is darker for the student because they can take an action, and that's the reason why they're a little bit lighter. So
okay,
we'll keep working on that and see if we can force it to go darker.
okay. Yeah, they do show up in the system darker than what they look like on here, because this is a screenshot of the system. So the next page would be the enrollment confirmation page. Again, this is limited to folks in those central student offices and also advisors. So academic advising will have access to this page as well. So again, it's a read-only page, so you can go in, you see at the top, these have search pages. It doesn't just automatically bring it up, but once you search for the student, it brings up the page. It shows you that they've agreed to the honor code and then their class information, and you can scroll through. There's a scroll button on the top of that section under class to see that they've confirmed it, and then what their enrollment status is in that class.
Are pins required only after students are matriculated? What if they are only admitted and deposit and have their deposit paid? So this is probably
so that would be for admissions. So currently, admissions is not one of the 4 offices that is going to use the pin.
Correct.
Is that correct, Julie? Okay, I'm looking at Julie just to make sure that
sorry.
that's correct. So the folks in admissions would still use the same process of verifying that they're talking to the student the same way that they do now.
So if we currently have access to students' grades and other information, do we automatically get access to this, or do we need to request it? If they have grades, they would probably have the student community
Not
section, right?
necessarily. So the access, I believe, for this page is going to be the student offices, the main student offices, and the advisors.
Okay.
And so if others feel like they need this for some reason, we would need to have that go through the office.
Can you speak up? She couldn't
So
hear your
just-
answer.
I'll repeat it. So the decision was made that currently what's going to happen is that the main student offices, so again, that's folks like the registrar, the cashier, financial aid, admissions, will have that access to these pages, and the academic advisors. Those are the folks that are going to have access to this page.
Did we answer your question?
And I think there was one more above that about pins required.
The accessibilities office, is that one of the central offices that's going to have access? No, it is not.
It's that one from Allison.
Will pins be required for students or third parties who are asking for information through mail or email and have filled out the proper consent forms?
It will. And so anytime somebody emails one of those student offices, the student office is going to require the PIN before they'll send any information back in email.
That being said, there is a note from the cashier's office that is going out when students receive the email communication this afternoon, that if they're already using an approved email address, they will not be requiring the PIN on top of that approved email address. But that is specific to the cashier's office right now. Okay, so then the last page is the student agreements page. So this page, again, is limited to those folks that we just talked about in the central offices. So this is just to be able to see what the student has accepted, and then also their mandatory student health insurance status. So that, again, it's just a page that's read-only. You can't take any action on these pages.
I have another question.
Sure.
What is the difference between a student giving someone their third-party PIN to give them access to their information and a student completing a FERPA waiver form allowing their academic information to be shared with someone else?
That's probably a good question for Allison or Lauren to answer. The forms that have been filled out in the past are still valid, and they do still have those. This is actually meant to, I don't know if it's in a lot of ways or in all ways, replace that actual paper form as the process for giving authorization for FERPA access.
Do you have something to add, Tanisha?
I don't know. I think Allison, are you on? Can you answer that question?
Allison is on.
Let's see if I can give her the ability to talk. Allison, I think
Did you unmute her?
Can you hear me now? I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. That is a great question, and I think we need to work directly with the registrar's office to revisit it. And we can send an update out to everybody to let you know for sure.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
And what is considered an approved email address?
So this would be for the
cashier's
cashier's office, those approved email addresses.
It's their, well, just verifying it's the email on their student center. It's their UNC email in their student center or any email in their student center.
Yeah, so it is the email that the student is currently using, and then anybody that they have assigned as an authorized user, that person's email address as well. So those are the approved emails. And again, that is specific to the cashier's office. So if a proxy is already, or an authorized user is already communicating via email, they've already been added, they will not have to now provide a PIN as well to the cashier's office. That being said, if they are already a proxy, so they have a ConnectCarolina guest ID, or a UNC guest ID, they will have to provide a PIN for the other offices. So that the approved email is specific to the cashier's office only. Okay, so then the last piece, and we'll go through this kind of quickly because we've been answering questions along the way, so we're running a little long here, but the timing of the changes. And I can't seem to move my slides. There we go. So all changes are going into the system this evening, Wednesday, December 11th. So this is an after 5. So students will be able to create PINs immediately after the changes are in the system. So if they, if they read the formal email notice that's coming out this afternoon, and then they go into the system and look at it, the formal notice does tell them that it's available tomorrow, but you know, there's a chance right now with this being at this time of year that they're in there looking at grades. They may try to do it. If the changes are already in the system, they'll be able to go ahead and set those pins up tonight. And as admins, the same thing still applies. We're saying you can see the pages that you have access to tomorrow morning when you log into Connect Carolina, but if you're working late and the changes are already in, you'll see them tonight. And then the last thing is really just that important push that's going to be made at the beginning of the year. The enrollment confirmation piece is required for all degree-seeking students starting with spring 2020. And so just to wrap up, you know, we've got 4 new things happening for students. There's that student PIN and the third-party PIN. They're going to see a new agreements and confirmations tile. And then the enrollment confirmation piece, which will be required for the spring. And then as admins, there are 4 new pages, and then your access to those pages depends on what access you have in the system, what your role is, where you, what office you work in, that sort of thing as well. So questions?
Yeah,
I think I've seen a couple more come in.
Do PINs apply to alumni? If so, how do they set up their PIN if they no longer have access to Connect Carolina or were a School of Medicine student and never used Connect Carolina?
No pins for alumni.
No pins for alumni.
Are you anticipating that student affairs staff in all of the different departments, professional schools, etc., will be asking for these PIN numbers when students call, or is this being implemented first with the central campus offices?
So I think the idea was that first it would be the central campus offices with the expectation that other offices would eventually want to use it. So I think that it is going to be rolled out further later. There's nothing that prevents another office from asking for the PIN if they have access to verify it. So I think that it's fine to do that. This was just rolled out initially for the central offices.
Do summer school visitors need to create a PIN? If so, how can I receive directions for students when they begin registration in March?
Any active student can do a PIN and will need one to communicate with the student offices.
It says summer school visitors will probably not receive an email. Is that true? Like, are we going to have communications for that population?
I don't know that we have talked about that. I think that's something that we can think about. I mean,
all active students probably.
Right. Mm-hmm. And there is, so in the notice that students are getting today, there is a short video that explains what the PIN is, why we're using it, and where they go to set it up. That video will actually live on the registrar site. So it will be there for students to see, but there will likely be some further instructions or information posted on the registrar site is where this information is living for students to be able to create that PIN going forward. And one of the things that I think I didn't hit on early on with the PIN is part of the reason that we are moving towards the PIN is for the security of information for the student. You know, a PIN is something that they've taken out of their brain and they've assigned it, and so they know it if they don't share it. Things like their mother's maiden name, the street they lived on when they were in elementary school, their first grade teacher, you know, that's information that's easier for hackers and people with bad intentions to find. You know, that we are moving away as an institution from using social security numbers as an identifier when talking to people. So there have been changes in the system as well. And, you know, even beyond the university to move away from using the social security number as a way to identify somebody, because again, that's something that, you know, people can find out pretty easily. A 4-digit number, you know, I'd venture to say you've got to call a lot of times and make up numbers hit on the right one for that student with the various combinations that can be made. So this is really about security and safety of the student's information, is what the PIN piece is all about. And we are relaying that to the students. I should have just led with that, I think, at the beginning of the presentation as well, because I think it's looking at it in that respect, I think it makes more sense of why we're going this direction.
I got another question from some IT staff here that I'll just put on the recording. I don't have the answer, but I'll just put it out there so that we can all think about it and we can circle back later. But the question was, is there any direction to the offices of what they are supposed to do if they get an incorrect PIN? If somebody's trying to get access and they give an incorrect PIN. So we can follow back up with how the offices want that to be handled.
That's a great question.
All right, another question that's come in, are PINs required when you're talking to someone in person, not over the phone or email? So in person, are PINs required?
I don't think that any student offices are going to require PINs to talk to somebody in person, since they don't do that today, but I don't know if the offices are requiring one card or if they're verifying in some other way who they're talking to when it's in person. Do you guys do that? You do get an ID. So cashier's office currently asks for the ID. And so I guess they could do either or at that point, either ask for the ID or for the PIN, since it would be available.
Great.
We've exhausted the questions.
There are no more questions?
No.
All right. So can we read this, the comment?
Sure.
Just so we have it on the recording. The chat questions don't always show up on the recording.
Yeah,
So
sure.
just so that
It's
we have
not,
it recorded.
yeah, it's not a question. As long as I have a link to direct our summer school visitors
Yep.
to this information and how to create a PIN, I think we will be good.
Okay,
So it's
perfect.
just to
Yeah, we'll
follow up on
definitely
that
make sure
question.
to have that information out there, and also to make sure that you guys who work with students know where that information is. You know, it doesn't do any good if we have it posted and don't tell you where it is. So we will definitely do that. So we still have about 12 minutes. Any other questions? Anything else to share? Anything that you think that the group working on this might not have thought of in terms of, you know, how to use it and when to use it, that sort of thing? We'll just wait another 30 seconds or so. I will go ahead and switch to my last slide. So if you don't already know, we have a fair amount of information on ccinfo.unc.edu. The information on there is mostly directed towards administrative staff at the university. There's a lot of finance and HR information, and we are currently building the student information on there as well. But that is where this recording will be posted for you to go see out there. If you have general questions, something about the webinar, you know, something general about Connect Carolina, so not something's broken or you need access to something. We do have an email account, which is cc_communications@unc.edu. You can contact us there and we'll get your question answered. There is a Connect Carolina training, although most of that is finance and HR training. So I know this is a student population that we're talking to right now. So if you have questions about the training, there's that email address there. And if you don't already receive our newsletter, if you go to ccinfo.unc.edu, there is a link to subscribe to the newsletter. We try to send it out once a month, and it just has changes about Connect Carolina, what's going on with Connect Carolina, tips and tricks that we've heard from campus users about using the system and that sort of thing. But then if anything is broken, anything's not working the way you expected it to, or you need access to a page that you don't have access to, something like that, please, please, please use the help.unc.edu or call the service desk at 962-HELP. That will get your question or your problem answered as quickly as possible. When it goes via email or something, you know, there's not the same channels in place to get those questions answered. So do use help.unc.edu. And then last plug would be to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and to encourage those that you know. It's just another avenue to try to communicate with the Carolina community. Did we get any other questions while I was giving my little spiel there?
No additional questions or comments?
No additional questions or comments. All right, then we're going to go ahead and give you 9 minutes back in your day. So thank you everyone for attending. And as a reminder, this will be posted in the next day or so on ccinfo.unc.edu. Thanks.